finds everyone well and healthy and safe. And I hope you've been enjoying summer as much as you can with the way summer 2020 looks. I'm here in the Saker School building and excited to be in the building, excited to see some of the preparations that are happening in the building to be able to welcome our students back to school. I want to thank you for your patience. I know that the unknown can be very challenging, and I want to express my gratitude that you've given my team and I time to really work on a plan that is detailed and comprehensive that I'm going to be able to share with you this evening. I want to let you know that as soon as the presentation is done, all of our current parents will receive an email that has all of the slides with the presentation, as well as a document that has summary highlight points just to make it a little bit easier, as well as parent surveys that we're going to be asking every household to fill out. There's one Sager family survey and one ECC family survey. So if you have children in both campuses, we're asking that you fill out both. I'm going to explain a little bit more about what will be included in that, but those materials will be shared with you after the presentation. Before I jump into the details of the plan, I want to just take a moment to do a quick shout out to my leadership team and to my faculty and staff, many of whom are on the webinar this evening. I want to express my tremendous gratitude for the hard work that has already gone into creating this plan. And probably even more importantly, I want to express my advanced gratitude for all of the hard work that will go into implementing this plan. What we are intending to do is going to be challenging. It's going to require a lot of energy and rethinking things. And the reason I'm able to sit here and propose a plan is because I have a tremendous faculty and staff and leadership team in order to carry it out. So just want to give a shout out to my team. I'd like to begin by really talking about our guiding principles. And the truth is that these guiding principles are always our guiding principles, and they continue to be as we created this return to school plan. First and foremost is the physical health and safety of our community. Of course, the emotional well-being of our students, our faculty, our staff, and our community are just as important to us as physical safety. We pride ourselves on educating the whole child and making sure that we are an environment that is safe and nurturing and really shaping the next generation of mensches, not just educating them. But of course, we have a commitment to exemplary educational experiences as well. All of these commitments remain in place. One thing that I will say is that in the past, taking care of everyone's physical health and safety has not really had an impact on the social and emotional well-being and the educational product in the way that it has the potential to in the year coming up. We are committed to all of these principles, but we also know that coming to school with everyone in masks and staying 6 feet apart is going to have an impact on everyone's social and emotional well-being, the adults in the building as well as the children. And we're going to be working to support our entire community to make sure that we are okay. We also know that there will be some compromises in terms of our educational philosophy, the ways that we teach, the ways that we learn, the way that we engage. So we're committed to making sure that we are making the very best of it, but we have to recognize and acknowledge that school's going to look different. And there will be ways that we are adjusting and modifying, but we continue to use these as our guiding principles. I also want to emphasize the importance of our partnership as a school with you as our parents and our families. I am very confident in the plans that we have laid out and very confident that we will be creating a safe environment for our community. And what I am pleading with you to think about is the importance of everyone being safe and careful outside of school, because we can only control what happens in the four walls of our school experience. But if our students or our faculty or staff or extended families are spending time out in the community, not following guidelines, not wearing masks, not staying socially distant, the risk is far higher for our community. So I am asking all of you to please make your commitment to be safe, to follow the guidelines when you are outside of the school. And of course, I'm going to be asking you to hold firm to the protocols that we are putting in place in school. Those are going to be really important for our success. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, I'll be asking for you to fill out the survey as another way of partnership, because we do have some decisions we need to make that are going to be reliant on your responses. So I both thank you for your partnership and ask you to make sure that our partnership and responsibility for the health and well-being of our community remains at the forefront of your mind as well. I want to express my gratitude for our medical advisory team and our board task force, who were very, very involved in creating this plan, sometimes vetting plans, sometimes co-creating plans. So I want to express my gratitude to everyone who participated in that way. I also want to note that we certainly did not make these plans on our own. We followed guidance from the CDC, from the state of Illinois, and as you can see, we work with a network of independent schools. I have spent many, many hours on webinars with other heads of school, with legal representation that were brought to these different networks. So I'm very appreciative for the other independent schools who worked collaboratively with us as we created this plan. I'm going to be sharing a lot of information tonight. This is kind of the moment where we take the deep breath. Maybe you have a drink, maybe you have a snack. There's going to be a lot of information that I'm going to share with you. And I just want to reassure you that we are going to be reviewing our policies and protocols on an ongoing basis. So we can't change on a dime every moment that something may change. Of course, if CDC guidelines come out and they are calling for something that's more strict, we're going to move more quickly. But if things are perhaps more lenient, we may take a little bit of time to look at things, to talk to our medical advisory team. So we're going to continue to review these policies and these protocols. Also want to make note that there will be time at the end for questions. I ask that you hold off on putting questions in the Q&A until I've made my way through the presentation, because I do have a lot of information to share with you, and hopefully I will answer many of the questions that you have. We are currently in phase 4 of the state of Illinois Restore Illinois plan, and we are ready for all phases. No matter if there's transitioning back. Now, we would love for phase 5 to come our way. Phase 5 is when there's a vaccine or a treatment and life can go back to more normal than we have seen in a while. But we are prepared to begin the year in phase 3. And if we need to, we're going to be able to move back into beginning the year in phase 4, and if we need to, we'll be ready to move back into phase 3 and even to phase 2. I'm going to talk a bit first about phase 4 because that is our current reality, and then a little bit later in the presentation, I'll share more details about phase 3 and about phase 2. And again, you're going to get all of this in follow-up, so don't feel that you need to remember every piece of information or take screenshots of the screen. So in phase 4, our learning plan is on-campus, in-person learning for our Sager School, kindergarten through 8th grade, and for our ECC, our Alim Core program will run in person, and our Alonim Core and Extend the Day program will run in person as well. The specifics that are important to note are that we will be following all Illinois Department of Public Health and Illinois State Board of Education requirements and guidelines when we are on campus. We will be providing virtual access for students who are unable to attend in person, and that is specific to the Sager School. Now, that may be for a number of reasons. There may be families who are not yet ready to send their children back to school in phase 4. We will have opportunities for students to be able to Zoom in and to access their learning remotely. There will be students, as you will hear in a moment with our plan, who might just be out for a few days because they're sick or because they're quarantining or because they're waiting for a test or something is going on. We are going to make sure that we lose as little time as possible of instruction. So there will be virtual access for kindergarten through 8th grade. Now, the details are really to be determined because it's going to depend on the number of students. And what I mean by that is that if we have a core group in a particular grade and there are enough students who are going to be remaining home, then we have the opportunity potentially to actually create a remote cohort. However, that would really take a critical mass of students. We are preparing for every classroom to be able to have students zooming in. We've brought in some new technology to make sure that we have good cameras, to make sure that we have microphones so teachers can be heard. I will tell you this, we've never done it before. I'm excited for the opportunity to try it. It will, I am sure, evolve from what it looks like at the beginning. So this is going to be one of those areas where we are going to be modeling for our students. What does it mean to innovate? What does it mean to take risks and to try new things? I would put money on the fact that we will also be modeling what does it mean to make some mistakes and to have to learn from those mistakes and to have to revise your plans. And that's okay. So I ask for your patience in advance to know, particularly with this virtual access, it'll take us a little bit of time to make sure we have everything fully in alignment, but we are committed to making sure that we have that up and running. In terms of phase 4 cohorts for the Sager School, for the first 2.5 weeks, because we just want to start things a little bit tighter, there's going to be no mixing beyond the core classroom. So if a student is in 2A, they're not going to mix with the rest of second grade or anyone else for the first 2.5 weeks. They're just going to stay with that cohort. If after 2.5 weeks, everything is stable, we're feeling good, everything feels right, then the grade-wide cohorts can begin to mix for things like lunch and recess and academic groupings. We will touch base with our medical advisory team again before we make that transition to make sure that we are comfortable making that transition. There will be a limit of 50 students in any gathering space at one time. Those are the current guidelines for phase 4. We will make sure that we are abiding by those guidelines. For our Ginsberg ECC, Alim and Alonim will not be mixing at all. They need to stay as separate cohorts. Alonim, we have 2 Alonim classrooms, our 3-year-olds and our 4-year-olds. They will be considered one cohort because students will be joining together for the Extend the Day program in the afternoon. So those are our cohorts in phase 4. Now, what would cause us to return to remote learning in phase 4? So let's imagine that the state of Illinois is still in phase 4 and the governor is still telling us that it is okay to be in person. Of course, our goal and priority is to remain in person with our students. However, if for any reason we feel that our community is in jeopardy and that it's not safe for something specific to our school context, we might move to remote learning, even if only for a short period of time. The other reason that I hope we won't have, but is the possibility of inadequate faculty to run full programming due to illness, childcare, or other COVID-related issues. We have done an analysis. We believe we're going to have enough teachers. I'm going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about how we are going to navigate teacher absences. So my hope is certainly that we would not have to transition back to remote learning in phase 4, but we have to leave it as a possibility and an option just in case we feel it is necessary. Now, I want to talk about some broad strokes of how we're going to be keeping our community safe and protecting our community, and then I'm going to drill down into some of the details a little bit more. So the first is that there's going to be a daily screening at home for symptoms. This is going to be students, faculty, and staff, anyone who's coming into our building. There's going to be a daily submission via an app, which I will talk about in a moment, attesting to no symptoms in the household. This is an important piece. It's the household. You're going to be submitting for your entire household because, as you will see in a moment, if anyone in the household has certain symptoms, that impacts the entire household's ability to come to school. So if you have multiple children, you're not filling out the app multiple times for each child. You're going to be filling it out just one time. At the ECC, there will be daily temperature checks and screening on site. That is a DCFS requirement at the ECC. We will not be doing temperature checks on site at the Sager School. We are going to be relying on you as our parents to be taking temperatures and to be going through a symptom check at home. We are strongly encouraging everyone to get a flu shot this year, and we are asking for documentation when you do get one. All of the doctors who we have consulted with have talked about how much this can protect our community. So I'm asking everyone to seriously consider making sure that everyone in your family gets a flu shot, and take into account not only the health of your own family, but the health of the whole community as well. I'm going to be talking in a few minutes about hand hygiene. We're going to be teaching it. We're going to be reinforcing it. We're going to be making time for it. Of course, we're going to be wearing face coverings. I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of the school day. And of course, we're going to be distancing. I'm going to give you a detailed picture of what distancing will look like. Students will be using individual supplies. So where some classrooms often have communal supplies of markers and scissors and things like that, we'll be focusing on individual supplies. And again, I'll give you some more information, and regular sanitizing. So these are broad strokes of all of the categories that I'm going to be talking to you about more in depth as we move forward. And I want to recognize that it's really a lot. This is a lot of information. It's a lot of changes. And I want to, before I even give you the details, talk about how we're going to be preparing our students, your children, because we want them to come into the building feeling safe, feeling ready, feeling that they understand and that they have a chance to process how school looks different and what that means for them. So the first thing is that we are going to be making videos and providing information to preview the building and protocols before school starts, so that before they come, they have a view of it. Some of you may remember before we did Zoom learning, we did a little video showing them this is what Zoom classroom will look like. And I think it reduced some anxiety. So we're going to be creating some videos and providing some information. We're going to create the experience as we have in the past for students to meet with teachers before school. So for the Sager School, last year, you came in with your children for what we called listening conversations, for in-person meetings with Kahila teachers before school started. We are still going to do those meetings, but we're going to do them over Zoom. We're going to do those the 2 days right before school starts, the Monday and Tuesday. So in the next week or so, we'll be sending out an opportunity for you to sign up to schedule yourself for those Zoom meetings. Of course, at the Ginsburg ECC, there will be home visits, socially distant, so that the kids have an opportunity to meet their teachers as well. At Sager, we have decided that the first 2 days of school, which are a Wednesday and a Thursday, we're actually going to do half attendance. We're going to have half of the students on Wednesday and half of the students on Thursday. We'll be sending out more detailed information about which day your children are assigned to. All of your children will come on the same day. We'll probably do it by alphabet, so to make it as easy as possible. But we want to reduce the number of kids in the building the first couple of days so that we can ease them in. Everybody can feel a little bit more comfortable. Those 2 days will really be focused on making sure they learn their new environments, on practicing protocols, on making sure that the kids feel safe. And then on Friday, all students will come. At the ECC, everyone's going to come on that first Wednesday. Of course, we're going to be able to use time in our classrooms and our Kihila for students to process the changes and their emotional experiences. I know that for our younger students, our teams are already working on social stories to help them understand, to prepare them, to give them an opportunity to process. So this, I think, actually speaks to our second guiding principle of the social emotional well-being. We can't just throw them into school looking totally different with masks and different protocols and what do we do without giving them preparation, without giving them time to process. So we're going to be working really hard to be supporting our students through this transition. And what I have found is that kids are very resilient. They are much more resilient than we give them credit for. Often they are far more resilient than we are as adults. So we're going to be working really hard to prepare our students. We're also working hard to support our faculty. As I said at the beginning, what we are going to do is going to be challenging. So our teachers have already had time in the buildings starting last week to begin to plan, to see the spaces, to think about things. Things are going to look very different. They're going to be operating very differently. So we're bringing our faculty in so that they can be a part of the process, help shape the physical space, and be ready to welcome your students in just a few short weeks. Of course, we're going to be providing appropriate PPE for all of our faculty and staff. We're going to be providing training in our procedures and our protocols to make sure that our teachers feel ready before your children join us on the first day. We're going to be offering professional development really based on our new learning environment. So what does it mean to be creating lesson plans when you have some students in front of you and potentially some students online in the classroom as well? So really being thoughtful and intentional. It's not as simple as, great, turn the computer on, the kid is zooming in, all is good. It really requires a lot more intention, a lot more planning. So we are going to be providing our teachers with professional development and time to process what needs to happen in the context of our current environment. We are also going to be doing something that I think is really, really important for our faculty, which is that for the fall leading up into the winter, we are actually going to have 1:30 dismissals on Friday every week, because our teachers need time to plan, to reflect, to process. We're not really going to be able to do our normal faculty meetings in mornings, and you'll see why based on our morning schedules. So I think it's really important that we're providing that opportunity. I'm not making a decision yet about the spring, because who knows what life will bring in the spring. But I am letting you know that at the Sager School, there will be a 1:30 dismissal on Fridays from the beginning first Friday. And at the ECC, it'll be a 2:00 dismissal, so that our students who are taking the bus back to the ECC and meeting up with siblings, that we can align those dismissals. I think it's an important part of supporting our faculty as we make this transition. Now I want to get into some of the tachlis, nitty-gritty work. So we're going to begin with the screening app. We are using an app called Parent Locker. We will be sending you all of the information. And what we are asking is that the form is completed by 7:15 in the morning, particularly for students who need to be getting on buses. I'm just pausing for just a moment. Sorry, I had a thought come in. But anyone who does not complete the survey won't be allowed in the building. So the way it really works, the way the tachlis of it is going to work, is that on the app, when you complete it, if your kids are allowed to come to school, you're going to get a nice green check mark. If you are driving carpool on that day, you're going to pull up and you're going to be able to show us that green check mark. If your child is getting on the bus, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about drop off and buses, you're going to be able to show the green check mark. So we are asking that everyone is completing the check mark, and you'll need to show it when you're dropping your students off in the morning, your children off. I want to talk about the symptoms that you are going to be asked about. These are a list of the symptoms that the screening app is going to ask you about if anyone in your family has these symptoms. Now, as you can see from looking at these symptoms, some of these symptoms can be caused by other things. Some of these symptoms you may have because of a chronic condition or may be recurring for you. So I want to walk you through the if-then scenarios for the screening app. If this, then this. I'm going to walk you through, and then I'm going to show you a graphic that's included in the documents that you're going to get at the end of the evening that really show you. It's a flow chart, so you don't have to remember all of this. We've provided it to you in a nice flow chart. So I want to begin with if a student, faculty, or staff member, and you can see that I specifically have language here about anyone who's coming into our building on a regular basis. It is not just for students, has a chronic condition that manifests in one of the COVID-19 symptoms. So you have asthma, you have allergies, you have you have a sensitive stomach, right? Where you may just have one of those symptoms on a regular basis. We don't want to exclude you from school. You're going to have your doctor complete something that's called the chronic condition form. And you're actually going to get that this evening in the follow-up email as well. And you're going to submit it to the school before the first day of school, so that we have on record that one of your children or multiple of your children have a cough that results from asthma. Okay, so it means that when you complete that form, you don't have to click yes for a cough, assuming that the cough is a typical cough for your chronic condition. If the cough is more severe or seems a little bit abnormal, then you need to mark that in fact there is a symptom, because it is not the typical symptom. This again is where we are looking to you for your partnership in making sure you are truly assessing your children and where they are. We know that sometimes we say, well, they might be a little sick, but I think they're good enough to go to school. A little bit of a fever, but I think it'll be okay. They threw up once, but I think they're okay now. I am pleading with you that we are relying on you to be honest and to not send your children if they are sick. So a chronic condition is one thing, but we are asking that you not fudge on anything. So if there is a symptom that is more severe than the chronic condition, we are asking that you take that seriously. If a student, faculty, or staff member has a fever that's secondary to an other illness that has been identified by a physician. You went to the doctor, you got a flu test, you have the flu, you have strep throat, you have something. There's a diagnosis, and the diagnosis is not COVID-19. Okay? Then the return to school protocols follow the current standard, which is 24 hours fever-free and without significant symptoms, or it's 12 hours of being on antibiotics if you have strep. So same process, same procedures as normal, because we know it's not COVID, and you can go ahead and follow the regular return to school protocols. If anyone in your household has a fever or other symptoms of an unknown cause, you have no idea why it's going on, then you have to indicate on the app submission that you have those symptoms. You've got to call your doctor, and you have to keep your entire household home from school. So if one child in your household has a fever, the whole household has to stay home until we have gone through the next steps of trying to figure things out. So individuals may not come back to school, assuming, again, we don't know what the fever is from. We don't have a diagnosis. This is unknown. So either 24 hours fever-free without fever-reducing medication, and 10 days must pass after the symptoms first appeared, or a negative COVID test. Now, the testing is becoming more and more available, and as I'm going to share in a later slide, we're going to be giving you resources of local places that are doing quick turnaround tests. So if there are symptoms that you don't know why, unless you get a COVID test, you're actually home for 10 days. That child is home for 10 days. If you get a COVID test, you come on back, assuming that COVID test is negative. If there's a positive COVID-19 diagnosis in your household, then you're going to notify the school, you're going to isolate the individual as best as possible, and the individual with the positive test may return to school 10 days since the beginning of the symptoms and 24 hours with no fever, without fever reducers, and if symptoms have improved. So after a positive diagnosis, all three of those things need to happen in order to come back to in-person learning on either campus, either the Sager School or the Ginsberg ECC. Now, those who have had high-risk contact with someone who tested positive or is suspected of having COVID should isolate at home and monitor symptoms for 14 days. Anyone who lives in your home will have been considered high-risk contact because it means that you have been together, unmasked, closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. So this is an important piece to understand. If I give an example of a family with 3 children, one child has a positive COVID diagnosis. That child can actually get back to school within 10 days if they meet these criteria, right? 10 days since the beginning of symptoms, 24 hours fever-free with no medication, and symptoms have improved. The other children in that house actually have to stay quarantined for the 14 days if we know that they've had exposure to someone with a diagnosis, because we just don't know exactly when that positive test can happen. So that is an important distinction, and again, it'll be clear on the flow chart. If there's a positive COVID diagnosis and everything has resolved, except the symptoms persist, then 2 things have to happen. Either the individual needs 2 negative COVID-19 tests, or you need to get clearance from your doctor saying that there's a reason that you have lingering symptoms. We know that symptoms can linger for a long time. We also know that sometimes there can be positive COVID tests for a long time past when you're actually contagious. So if the symptoms persist, you'll need to be communicating with your doctor before you're able to return to school. If there's a positive COVID case in your child's cohort, so think about what a cohort means. In the first 2.5 weeks, that's just the class. After 2.5 weeks, a cohort will actually be considered the whole grade. Then the school is going to notify you, and every individual in that cohort will need to get tested before returning to school. Now, again, there's more and more testing sites that are available and faster results, which means that potentially we're only out of school as a cohort for a day. So if we find out on a Tuesday afternoon that there's a diagnosis, on Wednesday, we would do remote learning. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the remote learning. Everyone hopefully gets tests during that day. By Thursday, everyone who had a negative test is back in school learning in person. So we are ready to go back and forth between in-person and remote learning, because if there's a case in a cohort, we don't want to miss out on all of that learning time. We will focus on that being home. And of course, we will know that some kids may have to miss out on some of the remote learning, because they need to go actually get a test. And as I said, we're going to provide a list of locations that offer quick result testing. Now, this chart may be a little overwhelming when you first look at it, but it really gives you all of the answers you need about symptoms and what to do. So I'm not going to go through it because it really just summarizes everything I just said, but this is going to be in the documentation that you receive this evening. And I think you can, put it up on your refrigerator so that you just have it as a reference point moving forward. If someone develops symptoms during the school day, then what's going to happen is that individual will be isolated. We have a room off of the nurse's office and evaluated either by the nurse at the Sager School or by Zahava, our director at the Ginsburg ECC. Zahava will be consulting with our nurse at Sager as well when she has to make decisions. If it's necessary, then parents will be called to pick up the child, and of course a faculty or staff member would need to go home if we feel that someone needs to get tested or that these symptoms are questionable. So that's something for you to be prepared for. If your child begins to not feel well and the nurse says they need to be checked out, we're going to be calling you. We're going to keep them safe in the office while they wait for you. All siblings will have to go home as well. And that part's a little bit tricky, but until we actually know what's going on, we need to make sure that the whole household is home. And then of course, you kind of go back to that chart and the if then, right? Is there a diagnosis? Do we know what's going on? What happens then? So we kind of go through that loop, but we're really gonna measure the household. This is an important piece also. The city of Chicago has a list of high incidence states that they are requiring people who come into the city of Chicago to quarantine. And what we are saying is that if you come back from one of the states that are identified on this list as a high incidence state, we are asking your family to quarantine for 14 days. This list is updated every Tuesday. This is a current list of what came out today from the city of Chicago, and I've included the link that you will have in your presentation as well. One thing I do want to note, there have been some questions and I want to make note of it. I know there are some people who will go to a local state in the Midwest. They will drive. They will go either to their own home or they will rent a home. They will not be in any public venues whatsoever. They will not take public transportation. They are really just going to another home. In that case, you should let us know, but you do not need to quarantine if you are truly only going to a home and not in any public spaces. But other than that, you need to quarantine and check this list. We can update this list and put it on the parent memo on a weekly basis so that you can see the updated list as well. I want to get into some of the logistics of what's going to happen with our students around some of the safety protocols now that I've gone through some of the if-then. Excuse me. So we are going to be providing direct instruction with our kids, soap and water and hand sanitizer. Of course, that's going to look different for our 4 and 5-year-olds and our 2-year-olds than it will for our 8th graders, but we are going to actually go over, we're going to show them videos of what is expected and how to actually wash their hands and sanitize their hands in a way that is safe. We are going to be providing regular times throughout the day for hand hygiene, mostly based on transitions coming in and out of different times of the day. We're going to make sure that they have soap and water before they eat so that we're not just getting rid of germs, but we're also getting rid of the dirt. We have purchased contactless soap dispensers for the bathrooms, as well as contactless hand sanitizer dispensers in the classrooms. We want to minimize the surfaces that people need to touch, so we are going to be outfitting every classroom as well as the entrances to the building with contactless hand sanitizers. And we're asking you to reinforce the practice of hand hygiene at home. We know that it is one of the most important pieces to make sure that we are keeping ourselves safe. I want to talk now about masks and distancing. And you can see from this graphic from the Illinois Department of Public Health that we truly need both. That if we are masked appropriately and we remain at a 6-foot distance, that the likelihood, the risk of transmission is low. And our plan relies on us following these protocols. So students, staff, and faculty will remain 6 feet distance whenever possible. I'm going to talk more about the classroom and what that will look like. Individuals will be allowed to be within 6 feet of each other for short periods of time, less than 15 minutes, with appropriate face coverings and for specific purposes. So for example, there might be a few minutes in class where students are actually able to get up and walk around and do an activity where they're closer than 6 feet, but we're going to keep that exposure to a short period of time, and we will make sure that everyone is masked. All of this falls within CDC guidelines and with the advice of our medical advisory team. Face coverings must be worn at all times, except snack and lunch. And of course, they will be 6 feet distance from each other. PE, if it is outside, and if they are 10 to 12 feet distanced from each other. And outdoor classes. I'm going to talk a little bit in a few minutes about the classrooms. We are going to be setting up some outside classrooms, both at the Ginsburg ECC and at the Sager School. If they are specifically in assigned seats that are 6 feet or more, they will be able to be unmasked during the day. Face coverings will be placed in an individual brown bag when they're not worn. We're going to provide those bags. We're going to teach kids how to use them. They can decorate them, but the brown bag is important because it makes sure that any droplets on the masks can be drying and can be safe. So that is a protocol that we will teach our students. In terms of what masks are allowed, it's important that it fits over both the mouth and the nose, and then it fits snugly. And that reusable face coverings should really be washed and allowed to dry after each use. So if you are going to be sending your child with a reusable mask, we ask that you have one per day of the week so that it can, or that you're washing it. You can wash it at home in the sink so that it is dry and clean for the next usage. We do not want to have reusable masks that are not washed in between uses. These are the different acceptable face coverings. There are lots of different types of face coverings that your children and our faculty and staff can wear. The cloth masks, it is important to note that light should not be shining through. If you hold it up to the light, you want to make sure that it is multi-layered so that it is as safe as possible. I want to note that wearing masks is really not going to be optional. Okay, thank you so much. No, I'll take care of the alarm. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, guys, the maintenance staff is leaving. We are going to be very serious about the protocol and expectation of wearing masks. Many kids are already doing it in camp, so they are going to be used to it. And for some kids, it's going to be brand new. Of course, our focus is going to be on supporting our children. So if there are kids who are struggling, we're going to work with them. We're going to try to make sure they have the right kind of mask. We're going to give them all of the support that we can. But in the end, this is a safety measure. And if a child is not able to keep a mask on, they will not be able to stay in school. It's not a punishment, it's simply a safety measure. It has been made abundantly clear to me by the doctors that one of the most important things that we can do is to wear masks. There's a lot of research that has come out about people who actually were symptomatic and had positive diagnoses who were with other people, but when everyone was masked, there was no transmission whatsoever. So it's important that you prepare your children that this is not a game. The masks will have to stay on their faces. And of course, if you need support in making sure that your child is going to be okay with that expectation, you'll let us know and we will support you. I want to talk a little bit about spaces within the buildings. The first is that the use of common spaces is going to be very, very limited. So I'm currently in the Beit Knesset in the Sager School. This is not a room that is going to be used on any regular basis. If common spaces are used, they're going to be sanitized before and after. Sager School classrooms, I want to give you a bit of a picture of, okay, so you've talked to me about the guidelines, but what is this really going to look like for my child and for the classroom? So students are going to be staying in one classroom. This is a really big change, particularly for our older students, but even our younger students in first and second and third and fourth grade, they move back and forth traditionally between a general studies classroom and a Judaic studies classroom. They will not be moving. Students will have their classroom, they will stay in that classroom. Teachers will be moving in and out of the spaces, and that's going to include the specialists. So the specialists are going to be coming into the space, except for PE. They will be able to go either to the gym or outside, but the other specialists will be coming into the core classroom space. Students will have assigned seats so that their space is their space, and desks will be 6 feet apart. So we've already been in classrooms, we have measured spaces to make sure that we have enough room to do that safely. We are looking to buy or to build some clear desk dividers just as an extra precaution to be able to create a little bit more space as well. Students will still need to remain masked even if we have those dividers, but we're just exploring if that could be one additional layer of protection. For our older students, once math and Hebrew groups happen, they will take place in that grade's core classroom. So for example, if fifth grade has 3 classrooms, then when we actually start mixing for math, which will be after the first 2.5 weeks, then we will sanitize those desks and chairs, and fifth grade will stay within fifth grade classrooms for math, and the math teachers will move in there, the Hebrew teachers will move in there. There's going to be lots of sanitizing and lots of teachers moving. We're buying teachers some carts so that they can easily get around. And I just said that we're going to sanitize. I noted before that we are looking to create some outdoor classroom spaces. We have purchased some tents that are just top covers for sun coverage, but that do not have any sides, any walls. So we've got nice big airflow. We're working on creating several different spaces. The goal is going to be to get them outside as much as we can. They can get a mask break. They can get some fresh air. The Ginsberg ECC classrooms and supplies, we're combining those into one here. I want to share some of those details as well. Alim students and teachers are going to remain in one core classroom. They are not going to be shifting and being in different spaces. Alonim students and teachers will remain in one core class during the core program. And for our students who stay for the extended day, they will be combined into one classroom together. Students will stay 6 feet apart during Asefat Kita, their morning meeting, during snack and lunch. So during the formalized times, we will make sure that they are 6 feet apart. Classrooms will have rotating group materials for each day of the week that are going to be sanitized after each use. So really making sure that we are managing the cleanliness of the materials the students are using. Classrooms will have individual materials for each student. I mentioned that before. Designated spaces are being considered for outdoor classrooms at the ECC as well. In terms of Sager School student supplies, we're going to have individual supplies. I mentioned that before. If items have to be shared, they will be cleaned, they will be sanitized. We are going to be asking our students to bring small hand sanitizers. Of course, the younger students, we probably won't keep them at the desks. The older students can. We ask that you make sure any hand sanitizer that you send in is 60% ethanol glycol. If you have questions about the hand sanitizer, you can let us know. We are actually going to have a maintenance staff member who is going to really be in charge of sanitizing at the Sager School. Doorknobs, railing, bathrooms, playground equipment. We're going to be having regular sanitizing throughout the day. And of course, supplies in the classroom in between uses. And it'll be done by teachers and students as appropriate, right? Our older students are going to be trained in how to sanitize. So how do you actually wipe down your desk and your chair if you're going to be moving into another room and someone else is going to be coming into your room? So we are going to be giving our students responsibility for taking care of their space and their environment and keeping it safe and healthy when, of course, we feel that it's developmentally appropriate for them to do so. Ventilation is an important part of the plan. The AC unit at Sager, we've installed some higher quality air filters, and we've also increased the airflow. So we've done a few things to the air conditioning to improve. Windows at both schools are going to be opened as much as possible to be able to assist with that fresh airflow. It's not going to conflict with our air conditioning unit, so we're going to make sure that as long as the weather allows it, we have windows open as much as we can. Until the state of Illinois reaches phase 5, parents, visitors, and volunteers are not going to be allowed in the building. And this is a really hard one for me because we are so happy to welcome our parents and our community into our building. But we really have to create as much of a tight and closed environment as we can to make sure that we are as safe as possible. All parent events, such as the meetings before school, parent orientation, conferences, everything is going to be held virtually. We want to make sure that we maintain our communication. We want to make sure we maintain our contact, and we're going to do it over Zoom. So we'll hold events virtually. As you know, we have grade and school-wide events that are often really wonderful celebrations, and we have moved them to second semester with the hope that maybe we'll be able to gather together in person. If we're not able to do so, we will create virtual events just like we did in the spring of last year, but we wanted to hold out hope that perhaps life will look different second semester and we might be able to bring people together. So you'll get an updated calendar with all of those events as well. Until we go into phase 5, there's not going to be any early care. There's not going to be any aftercare because we cannot mix cohorts of children. We need to be able to keep the cohort at the grade level. There's not going to be any in-person PO after-school activities, although there will be virtual offerings in phase 4 or phase 3. You'll get more information about that as well. Athletics, we will see if we can do some athletics by grade so that students remain in their cohort. Alicia Honan, our amazing athletic director, is busy trying to figure out what that could look like. And as we have more information, we will certainly share it with you. Music and band are tricky because when you sing, you have more force that you are putting out into the air, and the same is true with instruments. So at this time, we're not going to be doing singing when we're together. We are looking, of course, for more research to come out about what schools are doing and if there's opportunities to have that evolve as the year goes on. I want to talk about band in particular for our 5th through 8th graders, which is one of our exceptional opportunities. We're going to begin the year slowly, and we're going to ramp up the program as restrictions evolve. We're working on detailed plans for what that means with Marcia. I put here our band director extraordinaire. She is going to be reaching out to parents with specific plans in the next 2 weeks. So I'm not going to go into any detail here, but you should know that Marcia has been hard at work trying to think about every possibility of what band might look like. She understands the restrictions that are in place for the beginning of the year, and she's creatively thinking about what it means to begin band and then to evolve as things change. So more information to come for those of you who are interested in band. I want to give some logistics around buses. We do encourage families to drive if it's possible. If you are able to drive, we encourage you to do so. It's just one less point of possible contact with others. The Skokie buses will be running during phase 4. We've already contacted our Highland Park families to let them know that bus is not going to be running at this time. The Skokie bus will not run in phase 3. If the state of Illinois moves back to phase 3, it's not going to run at that time. The buses are going to be fogged every 72 hours, and they're going to be wiped down in between uses. The students will only be allowed on the bus if the app screening has been completed. So we have to have the green check mark on the app so that we know that they are cleared to get on school. They're going to sanitize their hands as they get on the bus. They're going to be sitting with their siblings. This is a change. We used to have a lower bus and an upper bus in terms of the age of the kids. They're going to be sitting in family units because they can already sit next to their siblings who they have had exposure to. The seating will be staggered, so not every seat will be filled on the bus. Students will load from back to front as much as possible. All students must wear a mask for the entire ride, and just like school, this is really a non-negotiable item. In order to ride the bus, you have to be able to keep your mask on for the whole ride. Windows will remain open as much as possible. And Linda Schwartz is going to be checking in all of our students and following the Skokie bus. She's not going to actually be riding the bus with the kids the way she normally does, but she's going to be riding right behind them. And we're going to have a bus captain on each bus who's able to contact Linda if there are any questions or any concerns. I want to go through some of the details of drop off and pickup at our two facilities. I'm almost done with all of the details, and then we'll open it up for questions. So we are going to have staggered drop off in the morning at the Sager School. So every family is going to be assigned a door and a time to come to school. And the goal is we don't want to have a mad rush of all of our students coming into the building at the same time. We want to be able to safely space everybody out so that they can get to class safely. We'll begin at 7:50, and there'll be time assignments every 5 minutes until 8:05. We're going to be using all three doors, the south, the west, and the north door for drop off. All parents must stay in their cars. So you're going to pull up. You've got to stay in your car. Students have to stay in their car until either a security guard or a staff member comes up to the car, sees the green check on the app, and waves to come on out. Older siblings may walk kindergarten and first grade students to their classroom if that works for your family, or kindergarten and first grade students will be walked to their classroom by a staff member, because we know for our youngest students, they need help finding their space, at least for the first few days, and then they're going to run and find their way. But we want to make sure that we're supporting them in their first days. They're also, I don't think it was on the slide, but they will sanitize their hands as they get out of the car before they go into the building as well. So for dismissal, we are also going to do a staggered dismissal for the same reason. We don't want to have hundreds of kids leaving the building at the same time. So dismissal is actually going to begin at 3:20. The buses will be called first, and they're going to leave the parking lot at 3:25. The west door will then be called at 3:25, and south door and north door are going to have two waves of pickup. So there'll be two waves for the south door, 3:25 and 3:35, north door 3:30, 3:40. We will actually get on the intercom and we will say, first wave south door, you are excused from your classrooms. Those kids will go out to the south door. So we're minimizing how many kids are in hallways at the same time. There will be a transportation survey that is coming out shortly. Alicia Honan is in charge of that as well, to be finding out which door and time and all of those different pieces. So we will make sure that all of that is articulated before the school year starts. Once they get outside to the door, there's actually going to be waiting areas by grade, because the grade is really their cohort. So we don't want them going outside and all of a sudden mixing with everybody. So they'll wait with their grade in a socially distant way until the car comes to pick them up. Faculty and staff will not be buckling students. This is really important, especially for those of you who have younger students. We are not able to lean into your car to touch your seatbelts to buckle. So a couple of options for our younger friends who can't buckle. Teach them in the next few weeks how to buckle. And if that's really not feasible, then you're going to have to park your car, walk over to get your child, and then bring your child back to the car. So please know we tend to do this and be helpful in a non-COVID climate. We're really not going to be able to do it in our current climate. Any kids who are picked up after 4 o'clock are going to wait in the office. We've got isolation rooms if we need to keep them separate. So all of pickup really should be done by 4 o'clock. Different colored tags are going to be provided for each student's backpack so that it's really nice and easy for us to see. Ginsburg ECC drop-off and pickup, we're going to still do a staggered arrival. Each class is going to be assigned a separate designated drop-off time and door. Siblings will be dropped off with the oldest child. We'll make sure that you know where to go. The completion of the symptom screening app prior to arrival is going to be important. Parents at the ECC are going to park. You're going to follow a path to the playground where you're going to actually meet at the classroom doors from the playground to present the self-wellness check to the faculty member. We're going to take temperatures at those doors for those children. Hands will be washed with soap and water prior to coming in. That's going to be the morning routine at the ECC. Pickup at the ECC is also going to be staggered. Parents and caregivers should arrive no earlier than 5 minutes prior to the assigned pickup time. At the time, parents or caregivers will wait by the assigned door, and teachers will bring children out to you. While waiting, we are asking all adults to remain at a 6-foot distance to make sure that we're being safe for the whole community. Once the child has been handed off, we're going to ask that you return to your car immediately. This is another one that's hard just because part of our culture is schmoozing and being social with each other. But for now, our priority has to be the physical health and safety. So we are going to be asking as soon as you have your children that you go right back to your car. A couple of other logistics in the Sager School before we open it up for questions. Bathrooms are going to actually be assigned by grade. We have a couple of grades that will be sharing bathrooms, but we were able to actually designate that most grades have their own set of bathrooms. So they'll only be sharing a bathroom with their cohort that they're already having some experiences with. For the first 2.5 weeks, we're actually going to create a schedule by class as much as possible, just to, again, limit the exposure even from class to class. Of course, any student who has an emergency is going to be allowed to use the bathroom. We're just going to manage it as much as we possibly can. After 2.5 weeks, they're really going to be able to use the bathrooms whenever they need to because we have it controlled within the cohort. There will be a schedule before PE because we've actually assigned the bathrooms close to the gym to a grade level. So and we're going to have a maximum of 3 students in a bathroom at a time. You don't really need to know all of those details, but I share them with you just so that you know that we're thinking about them. You're not going to have to remember what our bathroom protocols are. We will teach your children. We will put the protocols in place, but I want to make sure you know that we are thinking about all of these different pieces. In terms of hallways, we will have signage up in the hallway. Two-way traffic is acceptable. You might hear that some buildings or some schools are actually designating hallways to be only one way. We have gotten the go-ahead that it's okay to have two-way traffic as long as there's no crowds, traffic keeps moving, and of course, everyone is still masked anyways. Students are only going to visit their lockers at the start of the day and at the end of the day, and if they need a code at recess. We want to minimize students in hallways as much as possible. So there's going to be the staggered arrival. There should only be a few kids in the hallway at a time. They will go right into the classroom. They will not go back to their lockers. They will bring whatever they need into the room. And of course, our teachers will make sure that the students learn the protocols and get used to the new routines. Okay, lunch for the first 2.5 weeks, students will be eating in their classroom because we're really not opening it up beyond that cohort. After the first 2.5 weeks, when we're able to open it up, God willing, everything is stable and healthy, students will rotate usage of the lunchroom by grade. So one grade might still be eating in their classrooms on a Monday, and another grade is eating in the lunchroom. And of course, it'll be sanitized in between uses. Hot lunches, if you sign up for hot lunch, will be delivered to classrooms. Now, I say here if the program runs, one of the questions in the survey is about your intention to sign up for hot lunch. I've added a lot of detail within the survey about the hot lunch program, the actual meal options, as well as the cost structure. So I'm asking that you please, please, please fill that out because we need a minimum amount of participation in order to run that program. But no students, there's no more salad bar, there's no more waiting in line. Everything will be delivered directly to the classrooms. Students who bring their own lunch should bring it in the classroom with them, just like we said. We don't want them going back to their lockers. Of course, we're going to disinfect the desks before and after they eat. We're going to have extra garbage cans. We're still working out some logistics that I don't have answers for you. What is ritual hand washing going to look like? We don't have the basket of challah that we can have kids say hamotzi. So we're still working out those pieces. Again, we just want you to know we are thinking about them. For recess, they're going to be sanitizing their hands before and after. We're going to be keeping distance protocols, both walking in and out of the building for recess. They will be with their grade level for recess. Equipment will be assigned by cohort, and we will manage that. And of course, they're going to be keeping masks and face coverings on. I think that this is an important point just for me to pause on, which is that some schools are saying it's okay to do recess unmasked. But the reality is, I am not confident that we're going to be able to keep them 6 feet apart at every moment of recess because they're kids and they're going to have freedom. So we are going to keep them masked. during recess to make sure that we are being as safe as we possibly can be. There are some changes in our staffing that I want to be able to share with you because of this plan. We are going to be increasing our nurse at the Sager School to full-time, and as I said, she will be available to Zahava to consult with any decisions that need to be made from the Ginsburg ECC. We will have an additional maintenance staff member at the Sager School whose only job is sanitizing. So we are adding an entire person to our maintenance staff, sanitizing all day long because the current staff just isn't enough to do the sanitizing that we need. We did add a third section of kindergarten specifically to accommodate students within our spaces. We looked at our kindergarten rooms. We said we don't feel that we can adequately have all of our registered kindergartners safely within these rooms. So we did add a third section of kindergarten. We are splitting 8th grade into 3 sections as well to accommodate students within our spaces and to keep those cohorts a little bit smaller as well. So those are some changes that we made. I want to pause here and note that some of you may be aware that all of a sudden there is a great interest in Schechter, particularly as some of the public schools are rolling out their plans. I have a prospective parent meeting tomorrow. We are entertaining applications. I want to reassure you that we are not going to push class size beyond what we feel is safe and following all of the CDC guidelines. We do have some grade levels, that have some spaces. We're happy to entertain that. If there truly is enough interest in a grade level, we would entertain the possibility of another section. But I do not want you, our current families, to worry that we're going to be pushing classes to a larger size because that's not going to be happening. We are hiring a few more permanent subs at the Sager School. Many of you know Linda Schwartz is our go-to person for lots of things, but she's also our go-to sub. She's always with us in the Sager building, and we are looking to hire 3 more permanent subs. It allows us to have people on staff who are readily available if faculty members can't come in for any reason. There are faces that hopefully our students will get to know and feel comfortable with so that it can be seamless if we need coverage within the classrooms. We are going to be asking our parents to sign a waiver. And that waiver is really going to recognize that you understand all of the precautions that the school is taking in order to keep our community safe, understanding that there is still some risk. I can tell you that I feel very confident in the plan, but I cannot tell you that there is absolutely zero risk. We are doing everything we can to reduce any risk, but we do need everybody to recognize what we're doing, to acknowledge that there is still some risk, and to say, my children can still come into this building. So in the next couple of weeks, when you get all of your other forms, we are going to be asking you to fill out a parent waiver as well. I want to take a few minutes to talk about what school will look like if we move into phase 3 or phase 2, and then we're going to open it up for questions. Phase 3 will be on-campus in-person learning if we have enough faculty. That's going to be the key part. If we do not have enough faculty, then some students will be remote and some students will be on campus. This is another area of the parent survey where it's really critically important for you to complete it because we need to know what your intentions are of sending your children to school in phase 4 and what your intentions are in sending your children to school in phase 3. Specifically, of course, we're going to follow all guidelines. The biggest difference in phase 3 is that the cohort is no more than 10 students. So we would have to rearrange our classes so that no more than 10 students are physically in the same space, and there would be absolutely no mixing beyond those 10 students. Math and Hebrew levels for our older kids would wind up being Zoomed at developmentally appropriate ways because at that point we will not physically be able to do any mixing. The Ginsburg ECC, the same situation, no more than 10 students in a space, and there would be no mixing beyond these small groups. The Alonim Extend the Day program would have to close because we would not be able to mix those cohorts. What would cause us to return to remote learning in phase 3? The same thing that I said in phase 4. If we feel that for any reason the community is in jeopardy or if I don't have the faculty to staff it. Phase 2, it's going back to 100% remote learning for the Sager School, for the Alonim program, and possibly for the Alim program, depending on parent interest and whether or not that could work for our cohort. The remote learning website will be activated just like we did in the spring. Daily schedules will be provided. They will not be exactly the same as they were in the spring because we've actually had time now to plan and think about things and see what works. So we are in the process of identifying what those schedules would look like. If there is a need for technology in your home, the school will provide that technology to you. Students will take materials home or we will arrange for pickup. So the last time around when we closed school, we just closed school and there was no access to anything in the building. This time around, if we have to go back, we will make sure that students either take materials home or can pick things up. Hopefully, we do not see phase 2 ever again, but we need to be prepared and ready for it. So that's the phase 2 plan. We are committed to being as transparent as we can be. We're going to keep updating you along the way. We have set up an email address that I am asking you to write down and to really use. It's called covidresponse@schechter.org. That is going to be monitored on a regular basis. If you have questions about our plan, if you need to report a diagnosis, or if you have any question, that is the place to communicate with us. And of course, we are going to be updating you as we go with any changes that we make. Okay, that was a lot of information. I hope you're all still with me and that I haven't completely lost you. I'm going to stop my share so that I can actually access some of the questions that have come in. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me for just a moment because I need to do a little bit of finagling here so that I can get to the questions and that I can get back here to you as well. Okay. Some carpool questions. What if you're driving other people's children or your children are being driven by another parent who didn't complete the app? How will you show? That is a great question. Thank you for asking. I forgot to mention it. So we are going to be asking you, if you are the driver, before those kids get in your car, we are asking you to look for the green check. And we are going to trust that when you pull up, you're going to say, these kids, I saw the green check, we're good to go. There needs to be some honor system. We will eventually get a report to see who did it and who didn't do it. But in terms of carpool, so if you are putting your child in another car, you're going to fill out the app, you're going to show the driver your green check, and then we are going to trust that they saw it and they're going to tell us when the kids get out of the car. If there's more traffic than you might expect, causing you to arrive at school after your designated drop-off time, is that a problem? We know you can't control everything. There's a train, there's a red light. We want to do as much as we can to manage the flow. If you show up late, we're not going to say, sorry, your kid can't come. So we're asking you to, do as much as you can so that we can manage it. But of course, the only thing is still go to the same door, I think is probably important. But we will, of course, understand, especially because the windows are only 5 minutes. That's one train and you're totally off. So don't worry about it. Can we request a specific pickup time? Yes, there will be a survey where you have the opportunity to talk about which time frame you'd like. And as I mentioned, that's coming out. That is not coming out this evening. That's going to be coming out in the next week and a half. So that will definitely be coming. Question about the symptoms app. When you're completing the app, if you check that your child has a cough that is not from a chronic symptom, will that mean the child cannot attend school? So if the cough is not from a chronic condition and is not from another diagnosed issue, correct, they cannot come to school. Now, you can call your doctor and you can communicate with your doctor, and if you have information from your doctor and your doctor can say, I think that the cough is from this and it's safe to go to school, we are going to trust medical advice coming from doctors. So, but the answer to the question is correct. If there's a cough and we don't know why you have a cough, you cannot come to school. And the reason is we simply don't know, and we cannot take the chance of having someone in the school with a cough that might be COVID. And I also want to pose and recognize that's hard because it means sometimes your kids are not going to be able to come to school. Our goal is to get them here as much as possible, and if they're home, to be able to get them back as quickly as possible, as long as it is safe and within criteria. Okay, if a parent has been exposed to a coworker in the workplace who is diagnosed or exposed, Will the child also be required to shelter for the 14-day quarantine period? Excellent question. The answer is no. The only time that a child will have to quarantine for the 14 days is if they have had direct contact themselves. So if the parent has had exposure and the parent is quarantining, my advice to you is keep that parent in a locked up room as much as you can away from the child. I know that's not always feasible, but really, if you want to reduce exposure, the child does not have to stay home unless the child had direct high risk exposure. Questions about bathrooms. How will bathroom protocols be monitored to ensure appropriate social distancing and the following of protocols? That's a really good question. So the first thing is that we're going to be as proactive as we possibly can. Number one, in teaching kids what the expectations are. Number two, in helping them understand the why. It's so important, right? If we focus all of our energy on the how, here's the rule, and here's when you can go, and here's what you have to do, right? They can get so lost in all of the different hows, all of the different rules. But we are going to work hard to get them on board with the why, the sense of responsibility for their own health and for the health of the community. We are going to increase supervision in hallways. People will actually be assigned to be walking hallways. That's going to include me and other members of my leadership team so that we're just out and about and we're seeing things. We are not going to have adults supervising every kid's bathroom at all times. It's just not tenable. Of course, if we feel that there's an issue, we will increase supervision even more. But there is going to be some element of trusting that we've taught them, that we're monitoring them as closely as we can, and hopefully that they are following protocols. Tefillah is a great question. I actually meant to talk about that more with that slide, so I'm so glad that you asked the question. So Tefillah is going to look different, and what we are going to do is that all of the classes are going to be in their core classrooms, and they are going to be Zooming together for one Tefillah experience. Our Tefillah educators are going to be meeting in the next couple of weeks to really talk about, so how do we do this? What can it look like? How do we keep them engaged? We are not going to be taking Torah scrolls out for Torah reading because we don't want to be having contact with a communal object, but we have the ability to be able to put a Torah reading up on a screen and to have students read Torah that way. There's a lot we still need to plan. At least for now, we're not going to be singing. It makes me sad. The singing really makes me sad because especially Likrat Shabbat, there's kind of nothing in my week like coming into a Likrat Shabbat with all of the energy and the enthusiasm. But at least for now, we're not going to be singing. So you can say prayers. You can chant prayers, right? There are different things that we can do where we're not actually singing with the same kind of projection. So everyone will be Zooming in, we'll be saying prayers, we'll be chanting prayers. We will still be doing what we call Iyun Tefillah once a week, where there's really more of a lesson about Tefillah. So that is what it's going to look like. And I think just like everything else, it's going to evolve. I think there are going to be things that are amazing and wonderful, and there are going to be things where we say, whoa, that really didn't work. We need to rethink that. That's not going to work that way. But the plan for Tefillah is for the cohort, the grade level, to be together via Zoom, but just not physically to be together. There will be services. We will go through the matbea of Tefillot, just like we're going to follow our scope and sequence. We're going to be teaching new prayers. So Tefillah is absolutely going to happen. And for kids who are at home, for whatever reason they are at home for, they will be able to Zoom into Tefillah, just like they're going to be able to Zoom into their classes. And since everyone is on Zoom for Tefillah, it's actually going to be a much better experience in that regard. Okay, some remote learning questions. For students who will stay home and watch class remotely, how will teachers help them one-on-one when they need assistance or have a question? I need more detailed information on the logistics of remote learning for those of us who want to go in that direction. Great. So here is what we know. The first thing I should say is there's actually we have a committee of teachers and administrators and staff members who are specifically focused on talking about this remote learning. So I think more details will actually come out in the next few weeks as we create them. But I will tell you some of the things that we're thinking about and that we have in place. The first is that just like we had the online schedule available when we were in phase, I don't remember what phase we were in, when we were fully remote, whatever phase we were when we were fully remote. Those online schedules are going to be available from day one. Because if any child is home, they should be able to access, and they're actually going to be able to follow their schedule and just click on, oh, my class is in general studies right now. I get to click on general studies, and that's going to take me directly to the link, and I'm going to be right into my general studies classroom. Every class is going to have a student who's assigned as the Zoom ambassador. That's the name that Debbie Harris, our educational technology director, coined, which I love, to really be kind of the connection and the liaison with the child or children who are online. Now, we know that that's probably more feasible in older grades. We'll have to play with what it looks like in the younger grades and see what's actually tenable. I think they'll be excited for the possibility. But it means that if a student, for example, has a question, to make sure, I mean, a teacher has a whole bunch of kids right in front of them physically, and trying to manage everything, the teacher may not may not always see everything. But if I'm the Zoom ambassador, I can raise my hand and I can tell the teacher that someone has a question, so that we can make sure that that child is able to participate. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we are going to make sure that any child who is home is going to have one-on-one time with a teacher to be checking in every day. How are things going? Were you confused? Did you understand the lesson? What's going on? So we are going to be working on what that means and what that looks like. It may not be the actual classroom teacher. There may be another teacher who is assigned to be your child's remote learning liaison, so they have that direct contact. The other thing that's going to be important, and this is where, again, I give a tremendous shout out to my faculty that they're even just beginning to think about it, is what does it mean to create lessons that can be accessed both by the children who are in front of me and by the children who are at home. So really beginning a lesson with that in mind. And that will get better as the year goes on. It's different, it's new, it's going to be tricky. But especially if you are a family who you're considering, you know what, we're going to just access remote learning, your child will have access to a 5-day-a-week schedule that's going to have links to all of the classes, including Tefillah. We would expect that during PE, they are out doing their thing, having exercise, at least at the start of the year. Recess and lunch is just going to be an hour that you're on your own, you're taking a break, you're doing your thing. Down the road, we can talk about ways to maybe have them socializing during lunch, but we just need to get into the school year and succeed at the beginning before we can open that up. At the beginning of the year also, we are not going to have specials live streamed via Zoom. Our specialists, if you can just imagine how many classrooms they are going to be going in and out of and managing. So we want to give them an opportunity to just kind of learn this new routine of being in and out of spaces and what that means and individual supplies. And then we can talk after a few weeks about the possibility of being able to live stream into specials. We don't want them to miss those opportunities, but we also don't want to overwhelm our faculty. So that's a general picture of what that remote learning would look like every day, connecting in from Kahila all the way down to be able to have those opportunities with some breaks as well. So that's kind of a big picture overview of what we know now, and we're going to continue to evaluate and plan as we go. Okay. So we were closed during phase 3. It was not okay to be open in the spring. Why is it okay now? It's okay because the state has actually figured out what's what. If you think about it, no one was prepared for what we lived through, and everything just had to go on shutdown. But the state of Illinois really worked through their details of what is acceptable in the different phases. And it is acceptable to be open in phase 3 as long as you don't have cohorts of more than 10. So the reason is the state just wasn't ready and didn't give any schools guidelines about being open. In fact, we weren't allowed to be open. So that really is just about everybody kind of getting their bearings and learning more. If we want our children to stay home and do remote learning, what do you require of parents? That's a really good question. I don't know. To be honest, I don't know fully how to answer it. You're not homeschooling, right? We are taking responsibility for your education. I do think what we would expect is making sure that your children have a clean and organized workspace, making sure that your children have a routine, making sure that they're online when they need to be online, making sure that you communicate with the teacher if something's not working. It may really be hard for your child. You've got to let us know so that we can work and figure it out. We are not expecting that you're sitting with your child and doing every assignment and every work. Also, you know your child. So depends how independent your child can be. But our expectation is that we're able to offer the instruction and the materials And I think the ongoing communication is going to be really critically important for that. Will the quality of instruction be comparable if we choose to do virtual? Will they still be in the same cohort homeroom with the same teachers if they were going in person? So yes, they'll be in the same cohort. The only exception, and I alluded to this, and I don't actually expect that this will happen, but it's possible, and we're going to be surveying you, so you're going to let me know. If I have a significant cohort of kids within a grade that are going to stay home, that's really like a whole class worth of kids, then I might just create a remote section that does not have kids that are in person. But I cannot staff that unless it really is a critical mass of kids. My expectation is that they will be with the same kids. In terms of the experience, do I think it's going to be exactly the same as being in the room? I don't. Will they have access to the same lessons and materials? Absolutely. But it's going to be different. We've never done this before, but there is something that can be lost in not being able to be physically present when things are going on. They may not be able to hear every comment that a child says if the microphones aren't working loud enough. There may be aspects that are frustrating in that regard, but they will have access to the same instruction and to the same materials. But I have to be honest and say that I do think that there will be differences, and there will be pieces that students miss. We're going to do our best to make sure that it's outstanding, but I also want to be transparent about what I think is possible. I will also say that what our plan for the other independent schools that are opening, it's exactly the same as what other independent schools are doing. We are all in this together. The great thing about that is we're also going to learn from each other, right? So when other people succeed, they're going to share their successes. When we succeed, we're going to share with them, so that we hopefully will continue to get better as time moves on. Will there be mask breaks? And can students wear face shields instead of masks? So they cannot wear face shields instead of masks. Face shields are not as effective, and even teachers cannot wear face shields instead of masks. They can wear them in addition to, but the mask is absolutely required. So the only mask breaks that will be built in are that number one, they're going to have PE outside as much as is possible, as much as the weather allows. So that will be a break from the mask if they're able to have PE outside. They will have their mask off during snack time. They will have their mask off during lunchtime, and they will have their mask off during outside classroom time. Our hope is that every cohort gets outside at least once a day, even if it's only for 15 or 20 minutes during a mini lesson or a discussion or a read aloud, right? Sometime when a teacher doesn't need the technology and the kids don't need all of their workbooks and they don't need a desk in front of them. So our hope is that multiple times throughout the day, they will have those breaks. But other than that, the expectation is that they have the mask on. If there's a child who's really struggling, who needs additional breaks, we will work with you and we will talk about what that means, but it cannot be in the classroom and it cannot be on the student's own terms. It needs to be something that is really worked out and created into a plan. How can kids safely drink water throughout the day? It's a great question. I was just in a meeting in my office with someone, and we were both wearing masks, and we both drink a lot of water. And we would just, like lift up our mask and take a little bit of a swig and put the mask back on, and that's perfectly okay to do throughout the day. Our water fountains, because they're common and touched, we don't want kids using those, but we do encourage kids to bring water bottles that they can keep at their desks with them, and there's no problem. It just takes some getting used to. As someone who drinks, a gallon of water a day, if not more, you just have to kind of get used to, moving the mask a little bit, taking some water and putting it down. So we will make sure that they have the opportunities. How will lockers be spaced? There'll be a few spaces. There'll be a few lockers in between kids. For sure, they won't be immediately next to each other. And again, because it is staggered dismissal and arrival, there shouldn't be kids that are, super close to each other, and certainly not for an extended period of time. Will there be warm water for hand washing? Usually it's pretty cold. They're going to do hand washing in bathrooms and at sinks in classrooms. I think we have warm water, so I don't think that'll be an issue. I think we have warm water in all of our sinks, so I think that should be good to go. With all the hand sanitizing, there will be dry skin. Can we send hand lotion in with them to use as well? You bet. That is something we talked about with the doctors. That there's no, by the way, I asked the question specifically, is there any danger in using hand sanitizer as often as we might be using it? They said, no problem, not with the kind we're going to use, but there might be dry skin, especially as we get into colder water. So feel free to send hand sanitizer. That is not a problem. Will there still be challah available to send home on Fridays? I have no idea. I will find out. I don't know, but we'll find out for you. How sensitive to during the day symptoms will the protocol be? If a kid sneezes twice, are they going to be excused and require a COVID test? So it's a great question. Listen, we all have to use. We're not medical professionals, right? And I don't want to be making decisions that I feel like are really for the medical professionals. But one or two sneezes does not make a COVID diagnosis, right? Especially something is in the air and you have a couple of sneezes. I had the other day. I was in a meeting. I couldn't stop coughing. I like swallowed wrong. You know, I think, awareness is going to be high, and it might be that teachers say, why don't you just go down to Maryland and get checked out? Or like, Zahava, will you come check out this child? It doesn't mean we're going to send a kid home for every sneeze. If we think that there's something more significant, we're going to send them home. But it doesn't mean that that every little thing will go home. It's going to take time for us to figure out kind of where those lines are. Will there be new guidelines for outside school activities such as birthday parties? So look, the reality is that, outside parties should be following CDC guidelines. My advice is, you should not be having large gatherings that are not following guidelines. So outdoors right now, there's the ability to be together outdoors. Indoors, the law right now is 50 people masked and socially distant. So our expectation is going to be, our guideline is going to be that families are following those guidelines outside of school. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, we need everybody to be keeping everybody as healthy as possible. Is it possible to have a microwave or a mini refrigerator available in the core classroom to keep lunch as fresh as possible? I really don't think so. I got to be honest. Get a cooler lunch bag, throw an ice pack in. We're definitely not going to start messing around with microwaves in classrooms. It's just too much. But I think, in terms of the coolness, buy a cooler type of lunch bag and throw in an ice pack. I think the best that we can do. Are there going to be tutorials? Not in our traditional way, because kids are going to have to be in specific places. We are talking about what it means for teachers to have office hours during lunch and recess, potentially over Zoom, some different ways to get help, to get that one-on-one support. That plan is still in process, and we will let you know. For those of you who have older students, we will let you know. As a parent who has a very high-risk household, we're very concerned about COVID. I know that we will temperature check our children daily, but I don't trust other parents' words that they will do the same. I know that parents are very eager to get their children back to school, and I don't feel comfortable enough just trusting someone. It's a huge red flag for me. So I hear that, and I think it's actually important for everybody to, hear the concern that someone expresses. And all I can do is really just plead that. I mean, I brought it with me, but it's in my bag. I bought a contactless thermometer for my house. I've been taking my temperature every single morning for the last month. It doesn't touch my forehead. I just check it. I don't have a fever. Okay, I move on. It's really critically important for our entire community that everyone is doing this. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I cannot be in your kitchen with you or in your living room with you, but it's simply unacceptable to mark that off if you have not taken your child's temperature. So please go buy a contactless thermometer, put it somewhere in your house where it's just going to become a part of the routine, just like brushing your teeth and eating breakfast. It's the only way for us to stay safe. Are there any new teachers? There are some new teachers. We're actually not even fully staffed. An email is going to come out in the next week or two with a list and pictures and bios of all of our new teachers. I'm excited about our new staff, and we're still figuring a few pieces out. In phase 4, will we be able to borrow Chromebooks in case of remote learning? If you are choosing remote learning in phase 4 and you have technology needs, we will reach out to you. Anyone who fills out the survey and says, I'm going to keep my kid home for remote learning in phase 4, we are going to reach out to you directly. And we're going to say, do you have technology needs? And we're going to communicate with you. So we should be able to make that happen. Is there no early care for ECC students whose siblings ride the bus? I do believe that if the siblings ride the bus, they are able to be at the ECC, and Zahava can follow up with more details, but they can't come early. Kids may be carriers of COVID without symptoms. Why a negative COVID test is not required after 10 days quarantine? all of the guidelines for the if and then come directly from our doctors, and I actually have a couple of doctors on the call, and I'm going to hold for just a couple minutes and go through some of the other questions, and then that is a question that I think one of the doctors can help navigate. What will happen with IEPs, special learning accommodations, and kids who need individual support. So we are going to be able to have our special education teachers pushing into classrooms. The first 2.5 weeks, we're not going to be pulling groups from different cohorts, so they will be working with students from specific classrooms. And then once we pass that 2.5 week mark, we will be able to open it up and do small groups within the grade level. So we will be able to do that. If a parent wakes up with a minor headache, kids can't come, or is a headache on another symptom. Look, again, if you never get headaches and you have a headache, you should say you have a headache and you should call your doctor. If you're a headachy person and you kind of know sometimes you wake up with a headache and it feels like your normal headache, you can always call your doctor and have that on a chronic form, but you know yourself. But I would say if you don't get headaches on a regular basis and you wake up with a headache, yeah, be safe, stay home, call the doctor. Now, the doctor may say, it's no big deal, I'm okay, kids can go. And if we know that we have medical clearance, that is okay with us. There's other questions about COVID tests. I'm gonna wait and let the doctors navigate them. What do levels learning look like in phase 4? How do students go to different learning spaces? So after the first 2.5 weeks, they will be able to mix for math and Hebrew. Spaces will be sanitized. They're within the same grade level, so it's the same cohort. Will the whole school be notified if a child is diagnosed with COVID? Only the cohort that the child is in, meaning either the small grade or the class or the full grade, will be notified if there's a COVID diagnosis. We're not gonna notify the whole school, we're gonna notify the cohort because kids aren't gonna be anywhere near each other, so there's no reason to notify the whole cohort. If a parent goes on a business trip to a risky state, do the kids need to e-learn for 2 weeks? I'm gonna have the doctors navigate that question also. I believe that if the child didn't go, I'm not sure that they need to quarantine, but I'm gonna hold that one as well. There's lots of questions about training for cleaning. We're bringing people in, we're gonna make sure we've got that cleaning happening. Class and grade size, what about grade levels that have more than 50 kids? So that's one of the things that we are looking at, that we're gonna be talking about. The rule is that you can't have more than 50 kids in a space together. So really the only time inside that's an issue is PE. So we are thinking about if a grade has more than 50 kids, it might be that 2 classes are together and a 3rd class is not together. So we are working on those pieces as well. The maximum number of students per classroom, I think right now we may have 1 grade that has 17 in a class. I'm not sure that we're larger than that in any grades. Have you set up a fund for people to donate to for COVID safety costs? We haven't, but we will gladly take any donations for people who want to help us with some of the costs that we are incurring in order to open school safely. So there were a couple of questions about COVID tests, the quarantining, and the parents going. So I'm going to see, I haven't done a webinar before, so I'm going to see if I can actually find Dr. Erin Epstein. Let's see. This just says Erin. I'm going to see if it's the right Erin. I might be promoting someone else to a panelist who is not the right Erin. Erin, are you there? All right, I'm gonna look for Dr. Jankelovitz and I'm gonna promote him to a panelist. All right, I think I have you both there. You have to unmute yourselves. I don't know if you can actually show yourselves. Can you guys unmute?
Can you hear me, Lena?
Yes, I can. Look at that, it works. Okay.
Hi, Lena.
Hi, thank you so much for being here, for being willing to answer some questions. So I just want to restate, there were a few questions, but one was about the timing of a COVID negative test and about being home for those 10 days. And another question was about if a parent travels to a high incidence state for business, does the child have to e-learn for 2 weeks? So I'm going to let you guys take those.
I'll take the travel question. It's Erin Epstein. And first of all, I have to say, Lena, what you and your team, I've been listening for the last almost 2 hours, and this is absolutely amazing planning. This is, I've seen organizations and hospital networks not have as much planning as this. So this is just unbelievable.
Thank you.
Kudos to you and your team. As far as this specific question, listen, obviously a lot of common sense. If let's say a parent travels out of town, I would hope that that family, when that parent returns, that they were going to be doing exposure techniques such as masking. But I do not think that the child needs to miss school for 14 days. But I think that parent who possibly, let's say, went to Florida on a business trip right now, that parent, it would make the most common sense to quarantine from his own family as much as possible. You know, masking in the house, possibly eating separately, you know, those kind of things to minimize any possible exposure. That's my thought. Larry, do you have any?
No, I completely agree with what you said. Yeah, I think that's a good answer.
Wonderful. Thank you. So the next question is about, and I'm looking at my little flowchart here that we created to show all the ifs and then. So if there's a symptom, and it's not a result of something we know, it's not flu, it's not strep, we don't know what it is. What we've said is you have to wait 24 hours fever-free and 10 days since the symptom or a negative COVID test. Well, the question was, well, it takes time for a negative COVID test. So I think the biggest difference is that this doesn't have a known exposure. This is not a high contact exposure, but I want to make sure if you have something else to add to that to help our parents understand.
Yeah, I think what you said is absolutely correct. The person that has a fever of unknown origin, that comes what we call a POI, a person under investigation. And if it's deemed that they probably don't have COVID-19, the risk of infecting a child or passing on is highly, highly unlikely. So I think where we come up with this 10-day notion is that if you're not sick by 10 days, it's highly unlikely that you're going to get sick. So the question, I think, was why after 10 days, is 10 days good enough and you don't need 14? And why do you not need to do COVID testing after 10 days? The data shows that by 10 days, the risk of you transmitting virus or virus replicating is highly, highly unlikely. Even if you have been COVID positive, by 10 days, unlikely to be transmitting virus, but the test, if you do it, can still be positive and it doesn't mean anything. Tests can remain positive for up to 4 to 5 weeks post-infection, and it doesn't mean that you're infectious. So all the data, and this has changed. It was 14 days, and then it came down to 10 days, and I think it's a system that's fluid and changing continually. But currently, all the guidelines are saying that, you know, if by 10 days you're asymptomatic, you're good to go if it's non-COVID. Now, if you've got what's called a high-risk exposure, so your father, for example, is COVID positive, that changes everything. Now it needs to be 14 days. Why? Because they have to allow a 4 or 5 day gap for which you're asymptomatic before you become symptomatic. So if there is a COVID patient, a COVID member of the family, you are now going to be isolated for 14 days, and you can't test out of that. If there's nobody in the family that's COVID, so it's a fever of unknown origin, 10 days is adequate. I don't know if that answers it.
Larry, I just want to add one thing, because I agree with you 100%. Just so everybody understands, when we say 10 and 14 days, the clock starts when with the symptoms, not with the test. So for example, let's say on a Friday afternoon, you start getting symptoms, but you kind of wait it out over the weekend, and then on Monday morning, you go get a test, and God forbid it's, you know, COVID positive. Your symptoms started on, you know, Friday when your symptoms started. That's when the clock starts of that 10 to 14 days, not when you got that test. Is that correct, Larry?
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you both so much. And I want to just recognize again, the medical advisory team has been tremendous. We also have Dr. Judith Glassenberg, and we have Dr. Josh Levin and Dr. Laura Levin, who are on the committee with Aaron and with Larry. I'm just so appreciative, because we never could have come to the place that we've come to. So thank you both so much. I have a few other questions that are not doctor oriented, but hang on just in case I find any others. There are a couple other questions. What happens if I want to keep my child home for the first 2.5 weeks to see how it goes and then decide? I think in most cases that will be okay. If we feel that there's an issue with class size, we will contact you. If you express to us the interest in staying home, we're going to have that communication with you. I think for most grades that is okay. For some grades it may get tricky, but we will have that communication with you. What about the 8th grade Israel trip? So Mara Lally is, having contact with our people in Israel. It is too early to make a decision. I will tell you this. I would love for our children to go, just as I would have loved for last year's 8th grade to go. But unless there is a widely available vaccine or treatment, I do not imagine being able to take our kids to Israel. And the DC trip is questionable as well. So I am holding off on any final decisions, but it is definitely questionable whether or not those will come. What happens if there's an infant in the home who comes down with a fever? That's a good doctor question. Aaron or Larry, do one of you want to hop in on that one? If there's an infant with a fever?
I'm gonna defer that to the pediatricians. That I'm sure, hopefully, they're one of them on the call right now. And again, I think it's going to all be about common sense. And I think under those circumstances, the safest thing is to put a call into the pediatrician and get their advice of what of what they think we should be doing.
Yeah, obviously conservative. We have to treat everything conservatively, right? And so any family member with a fever in the household, whether they're in the school or not, goes down that protocol that Lena showed, that I'm sure she's going to show out with a fever.
All right, thank you. All right, a couple of others. Flu shots, we usually get them in October. Do you want us to get them sooner? Nope, you can get them when you normally get them. We're just asking that you get them. We all want to grow the Schechter community. Is now the time to do it? It's an interesting question. We are not going to just say like, oh, great, let's let everybody in. Everybody wants to come, in terms of saying the goal is to grow. We need to grow. Our job is to make sure we're taking care of our community. So in terms of evaluating whether or not we can accept new students, we have to really look at, can we do that and still take care of our community? And we're not going to just accept everybody who's interested just because they're interested. We're going to be looking at what our capacity is. We're going to be looking at who's coming if we feel that it could be a good fit. It's not the moment to turn everyone away, because I do think there is potential to grow the Schechter community, but we're going to be doing it intentionally and carefully. Okay, let's see. If you need to pick your child up early for a doctor's appointment, you'll call the office and you'll let us know when you're outside, and we'll make sure that the child comes out. Okay. From experience, the rapid tests are not covered most times by insurance and could cost a minimum of $270. So we definitely have access to providers who can provide less expensive tests, and we are going to be giving you a list of resources and places so that you have access to that. So we'll make sure that you have as much information as you possibly can. Okay. I think I got to most of the questions. I'm looking through. I'm hoping I didn't miss anything. Aaron and Larry, is there anything that you feel I didn't cover? Anything really important to say before we close, to make sure that our parent body information that they hear?
Yeah, Lena, I'd like to just add that, I'm listening to some of the questions, and absolutely, positively justified fear, anxiety. Larry and we work at different hospitals, but I had extreme anxiety back March 12th when the world changed. And I just have to emphasize that what we've learned March, April, May, June, July, that these masks that we're talking about work so effectively. I'm knocking, but not one of my doctors and we were inundated with COVID, and Larry could tell you, as well, masks absolutely work. So you have to have confidence in that. My nurses and my doctors have not, that have been extremely exposed numerous times in high risk procedures, and we're wearing masks. that we have not transmitted this. So these masks work, and I want you to have confidence in that. I just have to add that.
Thank you. Larry, do you have anything else you want to add?
I just want to mention that I think you've mentioned it a few times, the honor system over here. This cannot work without an honor system. If one person cheats the system, it can cause a breakout through the whole school. Now, hopefully with social distancing and masks, that would not happen. But the truth is you're putting absolutely everybody at risk. If we follow these simple rules, I mean, I worked for 4 months in COVID units, day in and day out, and not a single person in my group even got a positive antibody or a positive test, simply because we washed our hands, we socially distanced, and we wore masks. So if the parents and the kids can do things properly, be honest, I think we can do this safely. I really do.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you both for those comments. I want to wrap up. We're nearing the 2-hour mark. Thank you for sticking with me, sticking with us as we've gone through the details of this plan. If you do still have questions that we weren't able to address, I would say a couple of things. The first is look through the documents that you're going to get this evening and see if your answers are there in the documents. And if not, please use the covidresponse@schechter.org email. It really is going to be the best way. We're going to be checking that multiple times a day. We're going to be making sure that the right people get questions and that we're able to give the support. And again, I want to ask you to please make sure that you complete the family survey. We are asking that every household completes that survey before Shabbat this week, so that as we're going into next week, we have the information we need to make some decisions moving forward. I want to tell you that these last few months have been probably some of the most, well, for sure, some of the most challenging months, but also some of the most rewarding months that I've ever had in my professional career. I have felt the uniqueness and the specialness of our community in a way that I don't think I have ever been able to feel before. Our faculty and staff stepping up in every way, our students showing up and being flexible and learning how to be on Zoom, the tremendous gratitude from our parent body and partnership. I am still riding on the high of what that was in the spring, and quite honestly, it is what has buoyed me through the summer of planning and trying to figure out how can we possibly open school in the middle of a pandemic. I want to thank you all for being a part of the Schechter community and for making it such a special place. And I want to just reiterate what I said at the beginning, which is that I would not be proposing a plan to open school and welcome your children back if I wasn't confident that we could follow all of the protocols. I know that the news and social media right now are pretty hot around schools opening, and most schools don't necessarily have the space and the ability to follow all of these guidelines. And the reality is that our Sager school at one point had over 600 kids, and I hope one day it will again. But at this particular moment, it's actually a benefit to us that we're closer to 400 kids, because we do actually have the space to safely welcome them back, to keep the distance, to follow the protocol. So please know, if we didn't feel we could do it within the guidelines, we wouldn't be proposing this plan. So thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for making Schechter what it is. More information will be coming in the next few weeks. We're going to make sure that you are ready. We're going to make sure that your kids are ready. And school starts in 3 weeks. So I look forward to welcoming them at that time. I hope you all have a wonderful night. Thank you so much. I'm going to sign off. Take care, everybody.